Hey everybody, my name is Brian Anderson. Appreciate you guys showing up today. We've got some awesome attendance again, which we really appreciate. I know you guys get a lot of these invites in the COVID era. Today's a continuation of our HPE and Eagle Protips seminar. If you guys attended the last one, we did snapshots and we let you guys vote on what we were going to talk about today. And today's topic is problem solving with InfoSight. So today I've got some other speakers. Doing some of the heavy lifting is Mike Whitaker. He's a storage solution architect at HPE. You want to say hi, sir?
Hello, hello. Glad to be here.
All right. And as always, it seems Anthony Schweitzer makes his way on every webinar for Eagle. Say hi, Anthony.
I like to be valuable. Exactly.
Yeah. No, Anthony's going to be doing a lot of the background stuff, which we really appreciate. And I'm sure he might be able to not help himself and talk at some point. Right, Anthony? He's on mute already.
And I'm actually, no, I was joking. I'm actually off mute, but yeah.
All right. Well, hey, let's get into it. We have a lot of slides. We kept trying to delete some of them, but they all had value. So we're going to truck through some of this content. And I'm going to get focused. There we go. All right. So here's our agenda. I'm going to do a really quick Eagle intro, and then we're going to take a step back and just talk about what InfoSight is in case there's any uninitiated on the call. We'll talk about supported solutions, and what I mean by that is InfoSight just isn't for Nimble anymore, so we'll talk about some of the other products that integrate into InfoSight. Then we'll go over what's new. If you're anything like me back when I had a real job, I often was head down trying to solve new problems, and oftentimes didn't know what some of the products I currently owned could do to make my life easier. We'll then go over a feature showcase, and what I mean by that is we're going to go over different capabilities and screens and reports at InfoSight that would add value and help you solve problems. Then I'm going to take over from Mike, and I'm going to go over what I call real world examples. I can't say that this morning. I'll talk about problems you see in your environment, and then we'll talk about some of those features that Mike showcased and how we can solve those problems. Then we'll see who the winner of the contest is. I'll get into that on the next slide. And then if we have time after our 58 slides, we'll do some Q&A next steps and talk about some webinars. So I see a lot of familiar faces. I'm really going to fly through this, but I've been working at Eagle 8 years. The reason I like working at Eagle is the only thing our management tells us is to do the customer right? We want to maintain long customer relationships, and we spend a lot of time on due diligence and understanding the technical architecture and the outcome of the solution to make sure we're making a good solution for you guys and gals. We take that job really seriously. Anthony and I spend, I don't know, 5 to 10 hours a week doing due diligence with vendors and having one-on-one calls to talk through this. Very engineering heavy, and we like to install our products. We like to support our products after the sale, and I hope you guys appreciate it and notice. So just two things before I hand it over to Mike. I really love it when customers reach out and ask me to help troubleshoot their Nimble array. And selfishly, that's because with InfoSight, and I hope you see that today, we have all this information at our disposal. So I don't have to engage with support. I don't have to ask for diagnostic downloads. I don't have to remote into the GUI of your array. I can go in and I can get all these charts, all these graphs, and then I can get back to you and I can tell you what I think is going on and then give you some eye candy as well. The other thing I wanted to say before I hand over to Mr. Whitaker is that if you take anything out of this presentation, please remember that Eagle's always here to help. I'd really prefer you just kind of remember what's possible and not necessarily how you get there, and just reach out to Anthony or I or your pre-sales engineer, and we're always happy to engage and help you solve those problems. So I'll reiterate that at the end, but without further ado, Mr. Whitaker, you want to take over?
Yes, sir. Make sure I got the right screen. Okay. So I do also recognize a number of the names in the attendee list, and thank you guys so much for attending. Before we can really answer what is InfoSight, I always feel like we really need to answer why. And InfoSight being a tool that originated with Nimble storage over 12 years ago, even then, these were a lot of the same challenges and difficulties that they were trying to overcome. Even then, complexity, pressures from management to not only lower cost, but also do more with less, really was spurring along a void in the tool set that was available. And we knew that we could really differentiate ourselves if we could provide these tools to our customers. Now, when we think of InfoSight, normally we attribute that to Nimble storage. And Nimble support learned a long time ago that in order to really be a world-class support organization, they had to look well past the product that they were supporting. And in IT, having reliable and a fast storage really only solves a portion of the problem, especially as their environments become more and more complex. And those problems now are almost sometimes too complex for humans to solve, at least in a relatively acceptable timetable. And if we apply some common sense to this, most of the simple problems that we get that we can easily fix are about 80% of the issues. However, whenever we do run into those very complex ones, that's where the majority of the pain's coming from. And if we're going to employ an AI system to do anything for us, it's going to be able to match patterns across large sets of data. And this is really where our predictive analytics engine comes into play. And to looking into those complex problems and quickly providing those answers, not only to our own support team, but to put that at the fingertips of our users and our customers. Now, InfoSight, which is what we're going to talk about a lot today, is much more than just a portal that you can log in and I can see the graphs for my array, right? Of course, you get those virtualizations and you get those dashboards, but it is an incredibly important tool to our support team as well. And as you can see down here on the right-hand side, there's a lot of things going on in the background that doesn't have any eye candy that are extremely important to providing not only the solution, but also the customer experience that we're always striving for. Now, the data lake that we pull from now is absolutely enormous. When I was saying that if we want to really leverage AI to do something for us that we can't do as human engineers, it's to match those patterns. And through the courses of our career, right, we remember and we can solve problems again when we come across them. But now we're reaching up into so many data points that it's absolutely mind-blowing. And we almost have to look up new names for these numbers. And as of last year, we had 1.2 or 1,250 trillion data points inside of our data lake that we're using to run simulations against, to run scenarios against, to identify and proactively solve problems for our customers before they become problems. So it all results in a transformed support experience, is what we genuinely believe. The same thing's been true for Nimble for a long time. This is something that HPE did not change through the acquisition, and as a matter of fact, is moving themselves into that model, which is what a lot of this content is going to be about. But not having any more escalations, not having to prove to somebody on the phone that you have a problem, being able to call in and the person that answers the phone is the person that fixes your problem. And as we continue to increase our install base, and the number here is 900% over the last 5 years, we're still now reducing the number of manual cases created just through intelligent operations on the support side. And I always loved this slide because this is what really brought me to HPE. Was I had been a Nimble engineer from a partner perspective, from a customer's perspective for a long time. I believe in products, not because I think the sheet metal's great or I think the software is pretty, but I believe in the products because of the people that stand behind them. And this is always a brag slide for me because this is what I am most proud of as part of this organization. HPE is extending InfoSight across now almost everything inside of the HPE portfolio, anything that is our own IP. So Nimble storage, yes. 3PAR. 3PAR has had a similar feature since launch. It was never as elegant as InfoSight was. We're actively working to repair that. Primera launched integrated into InfoSight. HPE servers, which is what we're going to dive into here in just a minute, has been a huge help to a number of my customers. And that extends across everything that's really HPE compute. So synergy, simplicity. If you have one of our partner solutions that's based on Cumulo or anything that would use Apollo, those servers come into InfoSight now. And of course, DHCI, which is really what happens whenever you get all of this experience and you really start to build a rock solid converged architecture built on intelligence. So what's new? Now, we've had cross-stack analytics for VMware for some time. I had a slide before where we were talking about the majority of the issues that we're solving are not coming from the storage layer. In order to really understand how and even what we would call a simple environment, which is really truly pretty complex, you've got to be able to understand the hypervisor that's running on top of it. There's so many shared resources now. It's absolutely necessary. Something we just launched now, though, is for our Hyper-V customers is a lot of the same features. The cross-stack analytics for VMware, I know has saved my bacon a number of times, but a lot of the customers that rely on tools like InfoSight don't have these enormous staffs, right? So a lot of state or local education institutions. And Hyper-V has got a footprint in a lot of those different places. And bringing that same type of analytic power and support experience to those Hyper-V customers is something that I'm very excited about. Now, it's a little bit different setup because it's a different hypervisor, but it's still very, very easy to do. And what we're taking this is, we started at predicting, right? So we did that, I don't know, about 7, 8 years ago. We started doing predictive support, predictive replacement of hardware before it went bad. We've now into this middle piece where we're doing recommendations. We're doing live recommendations based on real live data, almost in real time, based on what we know about an environment, what we see about usage patterns, what we understand about our own hardware, but it's all read-only, right? It's you go in, you can see the recommendations, and the responsibility is on the administrator to enact those recommendations, or look deeper into their environment to understand what's going on. The next step for us is the autonomous piece of it. So automating a lot of these best practices. This is something that I really love about the DHCI stack. We call it a hyper-converged stack because that's the experience that it provides. It's a one single pane of glass management for your compute, for your storage, for your hypervisor, the whole piece of it. But what I really like about it is that we've built the AI into it in a number of different ways, in that if you set up a brand new VMware environment today and you did everything absolutely correct and you let it sit because it's right, in 3 years' time, you're going to be out of best practice, right? The environmental factors could change. Your workload could certainly change inside of those 3 years. So how do you attack that drift without spending a bunch of useless cycles trying to understand every little minutia, a part of the system, right? Well, that's where the autonomous piece comes in. We're building these best practices into the plugins that we use so we can make sure that we maintain those best practices over the life of the equipment. We want that equipment to be in place for a long time. We don't believe in a 3-year refresh cycle. We want you to enjoy it for a long time. In order to do so, we want to make sure that we're providing you with the most intelligent system and the most, lightest touch system, honestly, in order to get there. So InfoSight for servers, super excited about this. I've had a lot of really good customer conversations around this, and how does it work? Why do I want to use it? So HPE servers have had ILO in it since as long as I can remember being in IT. And they built an active health system into this years ago because they wanted to have something like InfoSight in order to improve their support experience, but they didn't have the infrastructure until the Nimble acquisition to get this done. So it works in concert with ILO and the active health system built into the server. Now, the active health system is something like a black box you'd find on a airplane or something like that. It's a flight recorder. And what it's doing is it's watching the telemetry of the server as it relates to hardware health and configuration, right? So it knows the model, it knows, some details about what CPU, what memory I've got in it, that kind of stuff. It does not record any kind of personally identifiable or what could be considered security sensitive like information. And it does not use any host resources at all because the system's, it's actually built into the silicone. It's built to do it. Now it sends the active health system into InfoSight when configured about every 10 minutes. Now, if something changes inside of the system, there's an automatic alert that's sent out. Now, that's an important piece of it, right? When we're working at proactive and predictive analytics around hardware failures and replacements, we want to make sure that if something changes in the environment, all the alerts and all the bells go off, right? Now, this is pulled in through a little VM. It is a virtual appliance, little bitty Linux box called the ILO Amplifier Pack. And this little virtual machine can manage up to 10,000 servers in an environment. So it's very powerful. It gives you a little taste of the InfoSight experience on-prem. So it allows you to pull your servers in, see things around alerts, around models, that kind of stuff, just right inside there without ever going to InfoSight. As well as something that has been very, very helpful to a number of my customers, firmware and driver updates. Being able to track that across multiple servers, even if it's across multiple geographic locations in one place, we may, some folks maybe have, enough staff to get all that done all the time, but the more that we can automate that kind of stuff, the more that we can take the guesswork out of that kind of stuff, the more reliable our system is going to be, the more predictable our system is going to be, and the better experience we're going to be able to provide to your customers overall.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
What's the list price on the ILO amplifier?
It is exactly 0. And it's important. It is a free download from the HPE's website, and you don't even have to have support on the server. We're recording this. I probably shouldn't say that too loud, but it's true. This is not something that you've got to have an entitlement to go out and get. It's something that we just simply provide for anybody who has an HPE server, Gen 8, so going back a number of years, Gen 8 or later with at least ILO 4.0. So taking the guesswork out of some of that kind of stuff. And if you've spent any time at InfoSight, hopefully you've used some of these tools. If you've ever done a health check with myself or with my friends from Eagle, we've likely gone through a lot of these tools or taken a look and seen, what it's telling us. But when am I going to run out of capacity if I'm doing budget planning right now, being able to go in and quickly go, okay, well, I've had this in place for a year. This is where we've gone in this last year. This is where I expect to be, at the end of next year based on what we're doing. That's perfect. Now, those are the easy ones, I think. When you see a project coming down the line, like let's say a global pandemic, and then all of a sudden you have everybody in the office working from home, and you have, 14 days to deploy a VDI solution that's going to support the entire company. Being able to not only check in what you've got, but add in multipliers and make some very intelligent tuning decisions inside of those capacity and performance planning graphs. It's really going to help you understand, do I have the headroom today, or do I need to add, or is there an adjustment that I can make to what I already have to free up the overhead that I need? This is by far one of my favorite graphs that's inside of InfoSight. This is the smoke and gun graph in a lot of different ways. So in this case, we got a virtual machine that had a huge spike of latency right there at the points where you can see. Being able to see, okay, so where did that come from? We went from next to 0 up to over 5 milliseconds of latency. Well, of course, there's going to be some storage piece of that, but really in this case, it's coming from the host. What does that mean? Well, where can I look from there? Well, once I know it's the host, there's some contextual menus in here that I can go and click, and it'll tell me what was going on at that host at that particular time frame. What was going on with the other virtual machines that are on that host at that particular time frame. And knowing where to look versus just searching for a needle in a haystack can save you tons of time. It has, because we are a storage company, right? Capacity is kind of part of our DNA, being able to predict that and help you guys make smart decisions around maybe when it's time to buy, but also maybe it's time to let go of some of the stuff that we've been holding on to forever. Understanding our efficiency, we've got, we support deduplication and compression on all of our modern arrays now. A lot of people still look at that as kind of voodoo math. I've talked with a lot of customers like, I just want a size unusable. I don't want to depend on anything that's, dedupe and compression. Well, in a world where we all have unlimited budgets, I would completely agree with you. However, I would rather help and use the tools that are much smarter than I am, help you make decisions that are going to save not only the customer or the company some money, but also, we can use that money perhaps towards another project that's going to be just as impactful. And having, understanding where my virtual machines are, being able to see latency statistics, memory statistics. Now, we have lots of tools that can also give us this information, but having a second option to go and look at, especially one that comes just included as part of another package that you have, is just going to help, either back up claims that you have or dispel concerns that maybe an application team has about performance on a particular set. There's the top virtual machines by top 10. Those are always the ones to kind of look for and understand. We use these a lot whenever we're doing health checks to understand who the busiest bees in the hive certainly are. And one of my friend Brian's very favorite graphs that's in here, the contention graphs. Having very easy to understand color-coded graphs where you can see where your hotspots are on either a data store or an entire array, and then having contextual menus for each one of these guys that you can click into, and you can get more detailed and deeper insight on what's going on specifically with that virtual machine. Now, we've taken all of these recommendations that we've done. We've been doing AI-based recommendations for a while, but we had it in the lab. It was kind of hidden off into the corner. Those of us that are in InfoSight knew about them. But what we've done now is we've brought it to the mainstream. We may put them in prime time. We've added a dashboard specifically for these types of recommendations. And these recommendations get stack ranked as to level of importance inside of that recommendation dashboard. And again, it's not just going to be storage related stuff. Now, whenever I'm doing a health check with a customer, I go in there and many times we're going to see either first or third, or at worst, maybe fifth. We'll see latency here, maybe we'll see this, and then we're going to see a whole bunch of entries of under and over provisioned CPU on virtual machines. We could do a whole nother series on how VMware does time slicing for CPUs on virtual machines. And we probably should at some point, because it's one of those things where more is not always better. And there's important rules to understand that. Well, our AI does understand that, and it makes smart recommendations based on what it can see and the type of performance the virtual machine's not only doing by itself, but also in relation to everything else that's going on in the environment. And you can find that recommendation dashboards either under dashboards there at the top ribbon interface. And then each one of these you can search by, I only want to see storage. I only want to see virtual machine stuff. I only want to see stuff that's related to a host. And I can certainly search. Now, when we're working with those VM recommendations, let's say I did have an underperforming or an under-provisioned or an over-provisioned CPU on a virtual machine. When I click into it, it's going to give me a lot of really good information. Not only, as you can see here in the background, what my latency or my IOPS or my throughput was for that virtual machine, but also under the recommended actions, it's going to show me which other virtual machines in the environment that it is affecting. So it could be on the same data store, it could be on the same host, and it's going to try to stack rank those as well by the level of effect this noisy neighbor is having. So again, really, really powerful information to be able to get to very, very quickly. There are absolutely guided troubleshooting workflows. There are suggestions to be made. There are additional links in just about every page to send you to a graph, to send you to more information related to exactly what it is you're looking on. But we've been talking for the last 10 minutes about things that we're doing on our own. When you combine this with the amazing people that we have in support and the amazing people that we have at our partners like Eagle, all of this becomes tribal knowledge. And when we expand, beyond just our own frustration, and we spread that pain out among those people that really want to shoulder that with you, all of this information just helps us get you to where we need to go as quickly as possible.
So while you pause there, we have a question that came in. Just asking about exporting the data for other IT teams that maybe don't have access to InfoSight. You know, and you could take this further, but I know you can export a lot of this data to Excel and manipulate it in Excel. I do screenshots quite often. And then you can also set up user accounts that are a basic user, right? That can see certain things.
So yes, so you can add, so again, InfoSight is read-only, right? So there's nothing that somebody can log in and affect locally on a system. So adding, giving them account to log into InfoSight and look at exactly what they want to see. As you mentioned, Anthony, there's a lot of different places that you can do exports to Excel to be able to manipulate that data on your own or arrange it. I also do a lot of screenshots, honestly, with a lot of this data because the graphs, you scale the graph to the time frame that's relevant to you, and then you take a snapshot and you put that as part of your documentation when you're working on troubleshooting something. If there's ever a specialty one that you're looking to get, is there a specialty use case you have, just reach out to me. We'll figure it out.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for that extra color on that.
So not only in the recommendations dashboard, but we have added these recommended actions to a number of different pages where we felt like it was going to be relevant to whoever would be looking at that page at that given time. The operational dashboard is where you go. As you can see here under performance in this array, we have a number of these guys that are up there in the red, right? So that means that array is at a high CPU usage for that time frame. Well, we go there so we can see that, and then we can see all the top VMs down there below. This is a great page to go to as a kind of a landing page. Well, that's why we added those recommended actions over there. So I've got a CPU or an array that's running in the red, and I've got latency on a VM, and then I look over there and I say, oh, okay, now I can understand some of this because I do have an unaligned IO. I need to change up some of my performance policies to match the workload, or something got changed inside of my environment. Now, earlier we were talking about, kind of where we want to go, where we're taking it from just being, just watching the data to then make recommendations, and then taking it to the next level, which is going to be the autonomous piece of it, right? Well, we're certainly working towards that. Also, as with any system like this, anything that does alerts, it can be super chatty sometimes on the front side, right? It's the InfoSight's telling us, hey, we're getting abnormal latency on a data store, and then you go and look at it and you're like, well, abnormal latency is only abnormal because I've been running at 1 millisecond or sub-millisecond for the last 2 years, and now it's bumped up to 3, right? I don't need an alert on this. So they are also contextual in the fact that you can snooze these things. You can also adjust these alerts so that it fits your management style as well, so that you can continue to get the information that's most relevant to you. But yeah, and without explaining every one of these guys, if you're an existing Nimble customer, or if you're an existing server customer, and you want to have a health check or some help with understanding how some of this information works for you, that's exactly what we're here for. At the end of the day, we've talked a lot of the things that InfoSight does to give you performance-based recommendations, where those recommendations are coming from, and the products that those recommendations will cover. We've talked about, we built all of this to build a world-class support organization to empower those support folks to have the information that they need at their fingertips to drive towards root cause analysis as quickly as possible, regardless of whether or not it's something that's storage related or not. At the end of the day, we do all of this to remove the guesswork out of managing your environment. We want this tool to be something that is like having another member of your team. Honestly, we want it to remove a lot of the pain so that you can go and focus on the things that are important to the business. And unless your business is IT, you're going to get a lot more mileage, and you're going to get a lot more impact out of being able to focus on the things that are important to your customers instead of just being a customer. So
All right, so we just covered a lot of ground, so I thought what we would do for these last 4 slides is just talk about common problems you see and which of those solutions or how you might approach finding a solution to that problem with InfoSight. So we asked the poll earlier, and I think the top answer is just troubleshooting basic application slowdown, right? Typically this starts because an employee or an end user of sorts just says that something has reached unexpected behavior level, right? They're not happy. So there's a lot of ways we can help solve this problem. You know, Mike mentioned the first thing that I always do is I go and I look at that components of latency screen, because you may find it's an anomaly. Maybe you're doing a lot of backup traffic and your network was getting hammered, right? I think what I see most often, and Mike also touched on this, is the CPU ready metrics. I mean, what I mean by that is your host is struggling to schedule all the CPU commands from your VMs, and it's likely because you've got too many vCPUs provisioned, but typically a quick fix is just to move that VM over to another host. So there's some great screens in InfoSight to troubleshoot that. You may also want to see if it's an anomaly that was causing these performance issues or if it's an ongoing situation. So you can go back in time and look at the historical SAN and IOPS and throughput and latency screens and see if it's a one-time deal or if it's something that maybe you need to look at with more detail. And then finally, the AI performance recommendations, once again, powered by the cross-stack analytics, has made this a little too easy, right? You can just go in and look at that particular VM. You'll see on the right the recommended actions, and typically it's very easy to interpret what you need to do to solve that problem. So if I tried to tell a story here, it would basically be a new story every 3 or 4 days, because this is something that we like helping our customers with, and that InfoSight makes it really easy. So I think another one of your top answers in the poll was unexplained growth, right? So we see a lot of customers that will reach out and they'll say, hey, Anthony, I don't know what happened, but I'm at 80% capacity and I feel like I was at 60 just a month ago. So being able to go in and just look at your capacity growth and trending, we have a really great screenshot that drives home this example. We see this all the time, just to be able to go back in time to the week where the capacity started growing, and then start drilling down, you know, looking at your volumes, looking at your VMs, seeing what happened. Mike mentioned earlier, my favorite chart in all of InfoSight is the IO contention tree map. So if you're trying to see what anomaly just popped up or who's chewing up all your IO, or maybe you're having some latency issues, that IO contention tree map is awesome. I always recommend my customers go in once a month, maybe once a week, and just look at that chart. You'll get a kind of muscle memory of what your data center looks like. And if you go back in and you look at it the next week, and Web Server 2 is suddenly occupying twice as much real estate on that chart, right? Or Oracle Server 3 suddenly is red where it's been a nice white. I saw someone make a comment earlier that, like, I've never seen red on that screen, right? Well, that's what we hope that you see. But even latencies of around 2 to 5 milliseconds, you're going to see on the screen reported. So it's a fantastic way to just to go in, see what's changed, drill down through it, and then once again, you can leverage the growth and the forecasting as well. This is something that we help customers with all the time. Probably my favorite story here. I walked into a customer site one time. One of the scary C-levels sat down at the table across from me, and he started putting us to task because, in his opinion, we had sized his array wrong, right? So typically that could take 2 or 3 days to troubleshoot, but they were a Nimble customer. I logged into InfoSight. I quickly ascertained that they had quadrupled their IOPS since we had placed that solution in their data center 2 years prior. I was able to isolate one particular app that was beating the array up, and then I found a couple of configurations they needed to change. So I wrote that all down on a Post-it note, I slid it to one of the sysadmins, and over the course of 2 weeks, they solved all of those problems without spending a dime, right? Just leveraging information from InfoSight. And it turned what could have been a really awkward meeting into something that was really productive. So that was a great story in my opinion. You know, this doesn't happen as often, but when it does, it is really painful. When you have compatibility issues that you're not aware of between different components in your data center, or you have software bugs that your vendors maybe not even be aware of, maybe they're pointing fingers with each other, InfoSight can really help you resolve that too. Now, at a high level, they do something really nice where they will blacklist more recent versions of firmware if there's something in your environment that needs to be modified or changed or updated. So it's not too uncommon that a customer will call me because they're in the GUI and they notice they can't upgrade to the latest version. You can go into InfoSight and find out why. And that's really handy. You know, we're protecting you from creating a situation where you're going to have a reduced experience. But the other thing that I really like is just the proactive analysis to detect issues. And you can see a lot of this on the wellness reports. So I've had customers, for instance, get a notification from InfoSight that another vendor's OVA on a particular host has a memory leak. And if they don't reboot that OVA every 2 weeks, it's going to cause a memory leak issue that's going to take the host down. So now they're not even supporting something that they've created or take ownership of, right? But that cross-stack analytics has given them all that visibility. They saw with one customer, now they're going to help you with it. If you do have InfoSight for servers set up, there's also a really awesome wellness report that reports on driver and critical updates as well, which is something I think a lot of customers struggle with. And then finally, hardware issues, right? So I think even the most rudimentary of storage arrays are going to send you an email if a hard drive fails, right? That's pretty common. But InfoSight also requires heartbeats from all the arrays. So if the array goes down for more than 5 minutes, you're going to get a ticket created. You're going to get notified. I think a lot of our customers, when they're doing network maintenance on the weekends, have been notified by Nimble support. You can actually go into InfoSight and notify them that you're going to have an outage, so they won't create that ticket. So that's a really cool feature, but probably another one of my favorite stories is their ability to proactively detect hardware failures. So I had a customer a couple of years ago. They had a thermal issue in their data center, right? Their HVAC failed. Well, they had an environmental sensor, but they hadn't logged into it and it had failed. So Nimble detected them of the thermal event, which was kind of cool. But really where the cool part of the story starts is about a week later when they got a ticket from InfoSight saying that the particular lot of hard drives in their hybrid array were known to have a higher mean time between failures when they had gone through a thermal event of more than X degrees Celsius. So not only is InfoSight tracking different components of hardware, but they're actually tracking lots of particular hard drives and SSDs. And when they notice an issue, they actually jump on top of it. So in this situation, that customer worked with support to proactively fail those drives out simply because they had a higher mean time between failure. I don't know another solution in the data center that can claim that level of analytics and proactive support. And I just think it's really cool. So just to kind of close out here as a talking point, we covered a lot of ground. You guys aren't alone here. We always encourage you to share your data with Eagle. Typically on install day, we'll ask you to do that. Just as a reminder, it's read only. We're just looking at your performance and capacity metrics. But then you can text your favorite pre-sales engineer, which is probably Anthony, right? And say, hey man, I got a problem and I just want you to look at it. And we love doing that. That's one of our favorite things to do. I mentioned earlier that selfishly InfoSight provides so much information that it's very easy for us to do. And not only will we help you with an individual problem, we'll probably fire off a bunch of screenshots and eye candy. But if you ever just want to hop into InfoSight and do what we would call just a generic health check, or you want us to do a little bit of training, a one-on-one, that's something we're always happy to do. We'll get it on the calendar. We'll log into your specific InfoSight and we'll just go on a walk, right? So please remember that we're always here to help.